So as 2023 winds down, I thought I'd get a little personal and talk about my three favorite sets and my top five favorite cards, as well as a few mistakes that Wizards of the Coast have made this year. And if you are into the lore, but you haven't read the stories from this year, then I would advise backing out now because I am going to delve into some lore, some story and art stuff, and things that just kind of concern me with how they were handled this year. But for now, let's get into some of the positives, starting off with my number three favorite set from this year, and that is Phyrexia All Will Be One. Now, this set culminated a storyline where you got to go back to New Phyrexia for the first time in over a decade. It had fixes to a mechanic that was not really loved in Infect with the new Toxic mechanic. Now, I know a lot of people don't like being poisoned out of a game, but I thought it was a good compromise on the old Infect mechanic, which was kind of unfair with like the damage boosts and things that those had in those games. Now, we also get the finish up of the Phyrexianized Planeswalkers in this set as well, with the five Phyrexianized Planeswalkers that were turned trying to stop New Phyrexia from committing this new invasion. But that leads me to my first failure point this year with Wizards of the Coast. There was an interesting thing that they were trying to do. They were going to give us the 10 planeswalkers that were going to show up in the set and told us that five of them were going to be completed and turned to the whims of New Phyrexia. But the problem is not even 2 weeks after that thing was revealed, there was leaks of cards online from like an investor call of some sort that actually showed off the oil slick variations of Vraska, Nissa, and Jace in their Phyrexian forms. So we already knew three of the five Phyrexianized planeswalkers, and everybody kind of assumed Luca was going to get nailed because nobody likes Luca.
He just sucks. He sucks so hard.
So let's move into the positive side of things again with my favorite number two set of the year, Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Now, I had a little trouble narrowing down which set I liked the best out of all the remaining sets. I already knew in my heart what the number one was going to be for me. So number two was kind of a pick and mix here. Now, the latest set actually has my love because it has a lot of things that I like in Magic the Gathering. It has dinosaurs, it has pirates, it has vampires and merfolk. I love all those races in the game. I have decks built around almost every single one of them, except for pirates. I don't have one of those yet, but I'm going to be working on one soon. And I really love the synergies in this setup. They have great mechanics in this new set with the new Discover, which I love Cascade. So Discover is just kind of in my wheelhouse for fun things to do. I love the map tokens, which allow for Explore. Explore was a great mechanic in the original Ixalan set. There's just a lot of good things to like about this set. And I also happen to really like all four of the Commander precons that came from this set and love playing with all of those new commanders that come in those precons. But don't get too comfortable because here comes my number two failure, and it's how they handled the deaths of the Phyrexian Praetors in March of the Machine. These are all powerful beings: Elish Norn, Vorinclex, Jin Gitaxias, Urabrask, Shieldred. We know these characters. We've seen them, the threat they've posed against the multiverse, and they had some of the dumbest deaths in all of Magic the Gathering. These things, these creatures, we know them in the game, and several people love them. And in the story, they died some of the just worst deaths you could ever come up with. Shieldred, she was captured by that dipwad Luca that everybody hates, and then Ajani beheads her because Elish Norn says, just cut her head off. That's it. Game over for Shieldred. Urbrask, he's captured later. She doesn't like what he's been doing. Oh, snap my fingers, rip him to pieces, drag him off. Okay. So the only consolation prize here is we finally get a good version of Urabrask, only to have him ripped to pieces. Oops. And then worse yet is Vorinclex and Jin-Gitaxias. Their deaths are horrible in the story. They're killed by nobodies. Not even a named planeswalker or a named legend take them out. It's like some random Zalfiran knight that comes charging into New Phyrexia, jumps down and cuts Vorinclex's head off because he's about to eat Teferi, and some rando with a mace slams Jin Gitaxias down into a tank full of Phyrexian newts, and the newts eat him alive. Not exactly great deaths for, these big bads that have been touted for so long in the game. And then there's Elish Norn herself, the Grand Cenobite. Her plans have caused all these problems with Realmbreaker attacking the realms and turning all the planeswalkers. All this stuff is her plan. And in the end, it comes down to her basically getting beat up so badly by Elspeth, and then Karn comes in and twists her head off. And that's it. And then he walks away. So yeah, the handling of how they finished off the Praetors was just so lackluster and rushed that I just don't understand why they ever thought that was okay. And then there was the grand ending to all this. They built up the Phyrexians as this unstoppable threat that if they ever got Realmbreaker online, it was game over. The worlds were screwed and everybody was going to turn into Phyrexians. Well, then they basically wrote themselves into a corner, couldn't get themselves out of it, and made it so that they had to come up with a Deus Ex Machina, which is basically the oh, we're just gonna snap our fingers and make this all go away. Well, their make it go away was, oh, well, New Phyrexia got phased out and switched places with Zalfir, and they lost connection to New Phyrexia, so all the Phyrexians shut down. But of course, that leads to more problems in the story. In the end, they just really needed at least another set to get this story right, to get the feel for everything right. They should have had March of the Machine be the invasion, and at least, most of the battles going on. And then they should have had another set that actually resolved the remaining battles, resolved the Praetors, resolved whatever they were going to do with the Planeswalkers. All this stuff should have been done in another set tied to this Phyrexian arc, and instead they rushed it and it just became a mess. And that ties into my next failure that I'm going to talk about right now, and that is the March of the Machine, the Aftermath set. Now, this set was ill-conceived at best, a money grab at worst. A lot of players seem to think it's a money grab based off of the pricing that was set on this thing. You were getting 5 card packs for basically at the cost of almost a set booster, and you could get junk uncommons, you could get junk rares still in these packs. And so the result is most players shun the set, and any of the cards that are actually worth anything are actually worth a lot more money because they were under opened and product is still sitting on shelves rotting because people are not going to pay, $5, $6 for a 5 card pack when you can get skunked on those packs so hard. The idea was pretty good, have a follow-up set, but they tried to reach into the cookie jar a little too hard there and are overcharging for those packs for what you get. And if they made those packs that price, but made it so you were guaranteed all rares and all mythics, and they were all, for the most part, good stuff, I don't think players would have had such a big problem paying that amount of money to get the good stuff in those packs. As it was, you could just get absolute junk in those packs, and it was just a very bad idea for what they did with that set. But now we're gonna get into my favorite set of the year, and you probably already know it if you've been watching this channel, and that is the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle Earth. This set has been an absolute home run for me as a Magic the Gathering fan and a Lord of the Rings fan. This thing has all that flavor and everything else. Now, Magic the Gathering and D&D in general has cribbed off of Tolkien's work for decades, ever since they started making the games. So it just made perfect sense to have these characters and a lot of the things going on in that set coming over to Magic the Gathering and being part of the game that we know and love. And for me personally, on this channel, these videos have been some of the most well-received videos I have ever created, especially the Hosts of Mordor Precon upgrade video. You guys loved that video, and it is my only video on the channel with over 10,000 views. Thank you guys for watching that one, by the way. And I can't thank anybody enough for that. But I can't wait to see what else they come up with the Universes Beyond sets, because these sets so far have been pretty good for people who are fans of those IPs. So that does it for my favorite sets of the year, but what about my favorite cards? Well, we're going to do a top 5 of those, and we're going to intersperse them with a few more of the goof ups that Magic has happened to have this year. But for now, let's get into my number 5 card, Staff of Completion. This came from Phyrexia All Will Be One, and this is one of my favorite mana rocks of all time. Now, it's not just a mana rock. 3 mana rocks come in all shapes and sizes. Clear back into like Manalith, 3 mana tap for 1 mana. This one you have to pay life to get the mana. But the nice part with this particular card is it has more functionality attached to it. You can blow up some of your own permanents. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, let's say your commander got pinned down by a Lignify, by an Imprisoned in the Moon, by a Song of the Dryads, something of that nature. You have the ability to destroy it and get it back into the command zone. It's especially useful for the last couple there, that Song of the Dryads and the Imprisoned in the Moon, because it's really hard to find, unless you have it specifically in your deck, to either sacrifice lands or detonate a land. Your commander may be pinned for the entirety of a game if you don't have a way to destroy that land that it got turned into. So in this case, you have the ability to go ahead and send it back to post and negate that removal. Now, let's say you don't need the removal ability and you don't need the mana part. Well, then you have the ability to proliferate counters on planeswalkers, on your creatures. There's all kinds of things that you can proliferate in this game, negative counters, experience counters that are on yourself. You have the ability to do +1/+1 counters, planeswalker loyalty counters. There's a bunch of things that you could use this particular card in just for that ability alone. And then you also have the ability to draw a card in a pinch. Now, for life is not nothing to sneeze at when it comes to drawing a card, but if it came down to pay for life, draw a card, or not do that and die, I'm going to pay the life and draw the card and try to get an answer to my current dilemma. As for my number four favorite card, it's going to be Call of the Ring from a Lord of the Rings set. Now, this card is very good. I love how it's designed. Black has kind of had a premium position as pay life, get cards. Well, this one actually gives you more cards in the long run for less life than it looks like. You pay the two for a few cards, but then you're also building up that ring counter. So once you get to two and you start attacking with your creature, you get to draw a card, discard a card, which also goes into the benefit of black being able to resurrect things. So if you're able to do that, pitch a creature and then resurrect it, you get even more benefit from this card. And I absolutely adore how it's designed. But guess what? It's time for another failure check here. Now, this is my number two failure of the year, and that is story and art inconsistencies with the game and its lore. Now, there's a lot of examples of art not lining up with what they wrote in the story. As a good example is Atraxa's Fall. In the card, you have the a picture of Atraxa with an eye beam falling through her chest, and that was all they had on her, destroying her. But in the story, they blew up a building and dropped it on her head because she was so powerful. They couldn't deal with her in any other way. That sounds more like how I would want my big bads handled because this is Elish Norn's strongest lieutenant. How is an eye beam just randomly falling through her chest going to kill her? That just makes sense, and I hate that inconsistency on that particular card. Another example of these inconsistencies comes in the story from the March of the Machine, where they're talking about Arcavios on Strixhaven, and we have the students that were already featured in past Strixhaven cards like Dina and Quintorius and Rutha, and all of them are trying to stop the invasion by bolstering the defenses of the school, and they get attacked by a Phyrexianized Dean Nasari, to kind of mess up their concentration and mess the spell up. Well, there's only one problem. In the Aftermath set, there's actually a card showing Dean Plarg and Dean Nasari as a team up card, and she's not Phyrexianized. There seems to be a disconnect between, okay, you are working on a story, you are proofreading cards and setting these up. They could have used any other Dean for that attacker in the story, and they accidentally used the same Dean on a card, and it just made it make not sense and broke up the immersion in the game for me in terms of that particular card and story beat. And that'll lead into my number one failure of the year, but we're going to talk about a couple of my favorites first to kind of break this up a little bit, get some good with that bad going on. And the number three is Lich Knight's Conquest. Now, I love spells that do mass resurrection of all of my creatures, as evidenced by the name of my channel, Twilight's Call, which happens to be a mass resurrection spell in the game that you can blast off, and then you can even do it at instant speed if you pay more. But the problem is you can also get your opponent's stuff back too. And then later on, they had Command the Dreadhorde, which is also a card that I absolutely love. And it does the same kind of thing, but you can steal stuff from their graveyard as well, but it costs you life. In this case, it's cheaper on the mana cost, but you have to sacrifice enchantments, tokens, and artifacts in order to get stuff off of it. But it costs 5 mana. Most 5 mana resurrection spells, you get one target out of your graveyard, and that's all you get. If you sacrifice two little tokens lying around or two artifacts or whatever, you've already gone above rate for what a 5 mana resurrection spell can do. And if you have multiple things, zombie tokens, food tokens, whatever, laying around, and you go ahead and pop off multiple creatures out of your yard, this thing wrecks face once you've been able to do that. And I love the card, and I can't wait to use it in more decks in the future. And then there was number two of my favorites, the Scytheclaw Raptor. Now, if you watch my preview videos on the Ixalan stuff that came out, you know my love for this card because I hate blue mages. This thing makes them pay, especially if you're using other red cards like the damage tripler City on Fire or Fiery Confluence, or a plus modifier like Torbran, because then they take even more damage. And if they're paying, between 6 and 12 life to counter a spell, they're going to have to be a little more picky choosy about what they're going to counter as things go along. They can't just be like counter, counter, counter. Not with that thing laying around and some modifiers on it. I love this card and I play it in just about every red deck I can fit it into. And then we have my number one failure of the year, and that is inconsistency with the Phyrexianized Planeswalkers. I have a question for Wizards of the Coast. Why did we bother even Phyrexianizing them other than for shock value? I mean, there's no stakes here. They undid everything except for the deaths of two of them, and only one of them anybody actually cared about, and that was Tameo. And the rest of them, it was all undone. And the thing is in the art and in the story, it made it sound like this stuff should not be able to be undone. Ajani had metal under his skin, and Nissa had extra arms grafted onto her. And I'm like, this stuff should not be undoable. Vraska's legs were turned into a serpentine tail. I mean, these things should not be able to be undone, and yet they were. And it was crazy. And there was inconsistency with even how they did that. And we'll talk about that right now. Two of them were undone with, again, the whole waving of the hand type stuff, where they sacrifice a Planeswalker Spark and Malira's life using the last of her powers to heal Ajani and Nissa, and it just poof, gone. The friction parts fell away and or disappeared. You know, in the case of Ajani, because the metal was under his skin. And in the case of the other three Planeswalkers, Nahiri, Jace, and Vraska, there's a lot of ambiguity here. Now, if you remember what I said about their Deus Ex Machina ending earlier of the Phyrexians just shutting down, well, I guess it doesn't apply to the Phyrexian Planeswalkers, because in the Aftermath stories, Nahiri woke up in the rubble, still Phyrexianized, realized what she had done, but her mind was her own because the Phyrexian oil was no longer affecting her, and ripped out all the Phyrexian implants and changes that were done to her and remade her body using her lithomantic magic. Okay, and then Jason Vraska in the story basically dies in combat with Ral Zarek on Ravnica, and then she just disappears. Her body's gone, and they made it seem like Jace, who never showed up in anything after he disappeared at the beginning of the March of the Mean Machine story, he was on none of the planes invaded, had used his magic to preserve his mind and create a way to save Vraska's as well. And now their silhouette appears on the key art for Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and they're probably going to show up there as cured from pheresis. Why? They should be shut down. They should have shut down like all the other Phyrexians. The story beat makes no sense when, oh, these Phyrexians will shut down, but not these ones. There's a lot of inconsistency there, and they should have just, I mean, honestly, they should have just left them dead. They should have had them all either be Phyrexianized and dead, or Phyrexianized and become the new future bad guys and move on to new Planeswalkers, and they just haven't done it. They, for whatever reason, they can't let go of these characters, and I think it was a very poor decision. And now for my number one card of the year, and you probably already know what it is because I've talked about it a bunch, and that is Roaming Throne from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Now, that card is in several decks of mine, whether it's something that has creature types attached to it, whether it's something that just has a single creature I want to do it with, but it doubles all the good stuff that I want to double up in the decks. Now, I use it in, creature types matters decks. I'm using it right now in a Sidisi deck that I'm going to have on the channel. And, I named Shaman on it, and her triggers actually get 2 times because she has the mill trigger on ETB and attack, and she has the creation of zombies trigger. So both of those will trigger twice every time she does her functions. So it's just a great card. You can just key it to your commander, or you can key it to an entire deck. Either way, you're getting great value out of this thing, and it's harder to kill because it has its own built-in ward protection as well. So that does it for my favorites and my disappointments for this year. What are some of your favorites and disappointments from this year with Magic? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It helps the channel grow. We're currently about 16 subs away from 600 new subs for this year. I thank you guys for joining the channel, and have a happy new year, and we'll see you in the next video.